Needless to say, communism and the downfall of communism had a tremendous impact all over Europe when it happened, which can be, I guess, evidenced by the fact that so much of European fiction and even nonfiction has been concerned with its impacts, its downfall, how it started. Everything is more interesting in retrospect, I guess. And this author, whose name is Slavenka Drakulic, she's a novelist, but this is a book of essays that she's put out, one of 2 or 3 books of essays that she's written. And this is called Cafe Europa, Life After Communism. And it's basically a collection of political reportage written in the years immediately following the fall of communism in Eastern Europe. She writes regularly for The Nation and for the New Republic, and which makes sense when you read the pieces, because they are sort of quasi-journalistic and descriptive in their approach that she takes. And I do use the word journalistic as a bit of a slight pejorative, and sort of as a way of denoting a style that's more inclined to be demonstrative and flat, as opposed to more literary. That might be the fault of the translation, I don't know. But the writing sometimes lacks that ability to couch her opinions in a critical framework that would offer the reader more insightful explanations. Most of her conclusions I found to be pretty banal, though some of her observations aren't totally devoid of interest. For a book of barely 200 pages, there are about 25 essays, so they are really short and accessible, made almost for picking up and putting down, reading 1 or 2 at a time at your leisure. In fact, one of the major criticisms I have in the book is that the essays are a little bit too short. I guess 200 pages and 25 essays, that's about an average of 8 pages a piece. And she's dealing with some pretty heavy topics here. I'll go into what those are in a bit. And 8 pages on average, I mean, some of them are 3 and 4 pages. It really inhibits your ability to fully flesh out the ideas that you're talking about. The essay topics are varied, but tend to revolve around a constellation of relatively lasting concerns that flow throughout the book. 2 of these are the consumerism of post-liberalized, post-communist Eastern Europe, and its growing homogeneity and its shifting political attitudes. Drakulic is deeply ambivalent about Europe being taken over by the cultural accoutrement, or as Baudrillard might have said, really the simulacra of Western Europe, symbolized by the ubiquitous Cafe Europa of the title, which is apparently an iconic Viennese coffee shop, which is cropped up all over the place. You sort of see these coffee shops that, I guess, the original one was in Vienna, but they sort of popped up all over Eastern Europe as a symbol of this kind of sybaritic luxury and luxuriousness. For example, a cinema in Drakulic's home city of Zagreb changed its name from the Balkan to Cinema Europa, indicative, she says, of a willed escape from primitivism, war, and everything non-European. One of the most interesting aspects of the book is how Drakulic looks at Europe as a name, quote, loaded with the complexity of positive values, which sort of begs the question, is Europe one thing anymore, or merely what we make of it for ourselves? The highlights of the collection, not surprisingly, are the pieces in which Drakulic gives herself the appropriate space and time to think through an issue, so it's sometimes the longer pieces. A few of my favorites are The Trouble with Sales is the name of an essay, which explores some patterns, ones that Drakulic herself admits are paradoxes about shopping and consumerism and in an age of the new economic logic of capitalism, especially her old habit of seeking out sales, which she's never been able to really kick. There's another essay called Invisible Walls Between Us, which looks at the bizarre and discriminatory travel strictures imposed on Easterners, who were often looked down upon as suspicious foreigners while traveling in Western Europe. And there's another interesting little essay on a topic probably little known to Americans called A King for the Balkans, which was an interesting look at the political psychology in Yugoslavia as Prince Alexander makes his first post-exilic visit to an unusually warm reception, especially given the country's history of previous monarchy. So, a bit of a hit and miss collection, I would say, but certainly some interesting things to thumb around with if you happen to get your hands on it. Slavenka Drakulic's Cafe Europa, Life After Communism.